Hello, I'm Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're going to do some Q&As. People like them, I guess. Uh, Nelson, what do you think of S&W 41s? Are the old ones easily worked on? All the old timers who have one around here rave about them. Seem to be always clearing a jam. Is it worth getting new production one, or just stick to Ruger Mark II and Mark IVs? I like the Ruger Mark IIs. I don't like the bull barrels because I'm getting old and they get heavy. But I used to use this term years ago, magic guns, and my Marlin lever action 94 and 357, but I shot it in 38 special, was one of my magic guns, and my M1A, and some of my other revolvers that I really liked, and of course my 1911. But the 41s, I've never owned one. They're pricey. They're high quality. They're well built. They are accurate, and they shoot well. And the ones that I used to work on them, I don't work on them anymore. I can remember when I was done testing them, seeing targets out at 70, 75 yards, shooting at rocks at the range that you're not supposed to do. And I would sit there and just line up NRA style and relax. And the trigger pulls were always good, and the guns always hit. And so, as far as I know, they're magic guns. Ruger makes a lot of fine stuff too. I'm not crazy about all the parts he put in his gun to make the magazine safety work and whatever else he did. That's why I like the twos. They have the slide lock. I like the slide lock. I never had a problem putting them back together, and so they manufactured one, making it easier for people to take apart and put back together, and I think that's a good idea. But I'm just a K22 guy, and so that's not a direction I go, but I know they're good. And then, so just because it's not a direction I go doesn't make it bad. I respect everyone's opinion and everything they want to shoot. I've had very poor experiences with Taurus handguns. Have you worked on their revolvers, and if so, what is your impression? There's a lot of stuff I used to do that I don't do anymore. In fact, I have a drawer that's still there, and I leave it there. That was my H&R parts drawer, and it says "ha ha" on it, HA-HA, because it was a joke on me. Not saying that guys out there that have a 929, 9-shot, 22, that's worked all their lives, and they put a high polished blue on them and they like them, be proud of them, be happy for them. But if you're in the business, you got to stick with stuff that you can make work all the time. And I got off on the H&R, and you asked a question about the Taurus. I just don't have a lot of luck with them. It seems like, everyone goes, well, it's Smith & Wesson made on the same machinery in South America. It is not. They're not even close. They have a little post with springs on them, and you can get them apart and back together if your hands are, the kind of hands that like to work on stuff, and you're a smart guy. You'll get in and out of them, but you'll see that they don't have the quality of machining and the parts fitting that you get with a Smith revolver. And for a few $100s more, just buy the good stuff. We're not going to live forever. You're here for a short time. Enjoy the good stuff, especially when you're just talking about a few $100s difference. Only buy one gun. I told myself years ago I was only going to buy one gun a year, but it's going to be a really nice one, instead of just trying to fill up, my safe. Nelson, I have a pre-Model 18 I'm having problems with. Pre-Model 18 is pretty cool. A 4-inch made K22 made before 1957. When I fully tighten the screw that holds the cylinder in the revolver, the cylinder gets stuck and is no longer available to open. If I loosen the screw slightly, the cylinder goes back to normal function. Back then, those are crown screws, and all the screws had a duty. And people will take, the back one's got a flat head, so it's under the grip. The middle one just holds a side plate on, so it doesn't matter what size it is. And the front one was cut at the factory so the cylinder could swing in and out. What people do is they switch the two crown screws, the front one and the second one, and they find out the second one wasn't tailored for the yoke, and now they have a problem. Or they just replace the screw because they lost the screw, or they tore up the screw head and put another one in. They need fit. And I get stuck fitting a yoke screw at least every 2 months. I have to fit one. I know I've done one recently. I've done one in the last couple of weeks, as I remember doing it. And I had to, I had to grind a little bit off, color with a magic marker, put it in there. Sometimes it's the side, sometimes it's the bottom, and see where it's rubbing when you're trying to open it. And you take a little bit more off wherever it needs it. And then my finality with it is I always go over to the 14-inch 400 muslin wheel and put a nice little polish on them at the end. But you can't take too much off real quick because it'll allow that yoke to move, and then your cylinder won't be placed right. It could rub the back of the barrel, and so I'd say take it to an armor or a gunsmith. But everybody builds AR-15s and puts trigger packs in striker fire guns, so I don't know how many people still do this kind of stuff. Ed, great info. Have a 1903 and 32 cal that has excellent nickel finish, but I believe the grips are white plastic. That doesn't look too bad. My question is, did any of these products come from Colt nickel plated, or were they done later? If you have an actual nickel plated Colt 1903, yes, they did come that way, and I have a weakness for them. On most of the guns, like post-war guns, they say Roy Jinks said add 15 to 20% to the value of the gun. A gun that old, it could almost double the price of that gun. And so if it's nickel, be nice to it. Don't take the lower end apart. They're a pain in the ass to put back together. What are your thoughts on the Ruger Security Speed 6 series of revolvers, action jobs, durability, and basis for custom guns? They were wonderful. They had a pigtail spring for the trigger return, and they make a lighter one that helped. Those are tricky getting in and out, but you can do them. And the coils, they can operate, I think, usually with a 10-pounder on the hammers. I didn't like the way they left the checkering all the way out to the sides at a 90. I always round them off all the way around the hammer, and then I always do a little treatment to the trigger to make it nicer to pull. But they're good guns, but they're just not in great demand and great supply. They've been gone a long time, 20, 30 years at least. Great video, Mr. Ford. You sold me, and I ran out and picked up one. Oh, K22 waiting for delivery, and my state's permit scheme. I had moved to another state. Let's see, Keys Girl. I decided to try a shock buff in a Ruger 1911 after only a few hundred rounds, less than 500. The frame was battered to the point. It had sharp edges at the end of the frame rails. Inside the dust cover, I was using mainly 230, some JHPs, nothing like buffalo bore. Cleaned it up with a file. I was curious if it would help. I also bought a Wolf 18.5-pound spring hoping to soften the recoil and slow it down a bit. This is pretty unusual because I just did a video on 1911s that went through World War II, and they had no such marks on them. And they used 230 grain ball, and they carried these things overseas. So I don't know how. Oh, it's a lightweight Ruger 1911 lightweight. They're not meant to be fired a lot, and they should come with 18-pound springs. Lightweight, lightweight 5-inch. I don't have a lot of experience with the lightweight 5-inchers, but if it's 16.5-pound spring and proper ammunition, they should work right. I'd use Wolf springs and try it again. Shock buffs will break up in the gun. If this gun's battering itself that bad, a shock buff won't last 500 rounds in this gun. And I understand we got quite a bit of crosstalk about shock buffs. And if you're a guy that goes, or a gal that goes to a match and keeps an eye on their gun and takes it apart and cleans it and loads their own ammo, well, you're never going to have a problem. But if I put them in guns as a standard routine, there are people that never take their guns apart. And I don't blame them. It's fine. They're doing what they can. They have other skills. But the shock buffs can cause problems. I was talking to God, not the real God, but the God of 1911s last night. And we discussed the shock buff thing because of all the hoo-ha there was on shock buffs. And some of his customers like to run them with 8-round magazines that have a weaker spring in them. And the slides don't come back all the way. And your slide stop wants to come up and get in the groove and hold the slide back. But now it doesn't go all the way back and come back forward. It just barely clears it. And so there's just a millisecond for it to get up there. You're running an 8-round magazine, which has to have a lighter spring. Because if you look at a diagram of a 45 with the 7 rounds in it, a cutaway, there's no room. The spring is completely compressed. So they have to go to a finer coil spring and a collapsible follower to get one more round in there. Hence, it's weaker. And if you leave it loaded over the summer in Phoenix, you're not going to have any spring left at all on it. So you can't even count on your slide being locked back. And he told me that he opens up the little window. It's not a window all the way through. It's just the part on the side of your slide where the slide stop goes in and locks it back. He opens it up so that to the front, so that that slide stop has more of an opportunity to get up in there and do its job. That's how much trouble shock buffs cause. And so, if you're in the business and you have people coming to you with all their problems, it's not me, 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 me. It's them, 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 them. And you have to work around their problems, not your own. And you can't tell people how they can behave. You have to do what you think works with the greatest amount of people you're working with. And so I got off track. You have the aluminum gun, but if it's coming back and beating itself to death, I don't know what to tell you. I sold a 1955 first year lightweight Commander Colt to a friend of mine who was a doctor. I just talked to him the other morning. He was talking to me about red dots and how wonderful they are. And I believe him. And a lot of people that can't see well use them. But I sold him a first year Colt Commander. And there was nothing wrong with that gun. And that was 1955 they made it. And I sold it to him 20 years ago, 20 years ago. And so the gun was 50, 60 years old when I sold it to him. This gun's got less than 500 rounds on it. You've got some other problems going on here. The spring is like a 13-pound or 12-pound. Something's going on. Something's not right in there. And I would send it back to Ruger or talk to Ruger about what's going on. Yep, we've covered a lot of information here. I've enjoyed it. I'd like to do more, but we've got a dinner date. So leave your questions and comments at the Gunsmith, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Thank you.